A bunch of interesting positions, some more outspoken than others. I've been a consultant myself, so it depends training. I've got it too. But let's start with that. The first question was, the composable CDP is better suited for engineering-driven organizations. Boris was kind of the only one who said, like, I kind of agree. Matthew, you said, like a real consultant, it depends. Could you elaborate a bit on that to explore what the skill set is that you need to run the different types of CDPs, composable versus packaged?
I feel like I'm being given the easy question, and I thank you for that, Glenn, because it really depends on the composition of the company that's going to implement it. If you're looking for a well-balanced company in terms of skills, you're going to be, you'll be looking for a while. They're difficult to find. You're going to have a group of engineers who start a company and they'll take the composable CDP route. You'll have a group of marketeers and salespeople who say, hey, we have this fantastic idea for an online service, and they'll go the package route. So the decision that it usually rests upon, in my eyes, is just the composition of the company and the resources that they have available, the type of resources they have available, engineering or non-engineering.
Okay, interesting. Jacques, you've been mentioning that you've bought a couple of CDPs. What's your vision on that?
I mean, when you implement a CDP, you need engineering support, right? This is not something that a marketer, salesperson, whoever can just put into place, right? They might be able to connect a few source systems, a few email tools, that kind of thing. But if you want to deploy proper tracking, you're going to have engineering support, right? So actually, in terms of the technical resource available, a CDP is probably less complex because you don't need to stand up a whole piece of data infrastructure. But I think in terms of, it's very much still, for a proper implementation, a engineering project. So I'm not fully kind of on board it's more of an engineering company kind of thing. I think both require that kind of company in the first place.
Okay, cool. We talked a lot about identity resolution. I was kind of surprised also by the way we approached the topic. I remember when CDPs basically hit the market, it was number one thing that they offered, right? People would buy it to say, I would like a customer 360-degree view, and that's why you buy a CDP. Today, the composable CDP usually doesn't have a unification engine identity resolution solution under the hood. How would you typically approach that problem, Boris, in case you have complex identity resolution? And when I say complex identity resolution, we also touched upon the piece of behavioral data, right, from your applications where anonymous IDs are involved. How do you typically see Census customers tackle that challenge in particular?
How companies have to solve this or try to solve this is, you can't be 360 with only a single set of inputs, right? So you can't just be 360 if we say we know everything you did on our website and our shopping cart, but we don't know what you did in, let's say, the payment system. So that's the first level problem of, like, you have to stitch those things together. And the way our customers do it, our people do it, that I have seen is some human, not necessarily that technical, but someone who has some amount of understanding of the context inherent in their company. And Jacques, I'm sure you've done things like this that you may have not called, entity matching or identity resolution, but you did these things to say this is associated with this person or this company or this workspace. And then you have to do the thing that I was trying to say that is somewhat complex and is the underlying data model. That is, a human doesn't necessarily just belong to one organization. They might belong to many, or that human may actually have many versions of themselves across, whether it's not just different emails, but roles that they have in workspaces. B2B has this all over the place. And I would argue there is no one tool fits, everyone to answer that question of, who should be in this net that, let's say, you're trying to solve a privacy related problem, or you're just trying to do a personalization problem, but you have to do it on this very much more subtle definition of, like, well, I want to ping all the admins of orgs or all the people who are in an enterprise org, but is that the people who belong to it, the people who own it, the people who are guests in it, the people who are, what if they're in an admin in one and not in another, right? You can't boil that down to person is an admin. Like, you just can't do that. And so this is the kind of work that I find our customers, like the users, have to do, because it's really business modeling at the end of the day. It's not technology is the tool, but it's business modeling. And products like ours, or what the job to be done in the kind of infra side is to project that into the place where you can take action, right? And something like that. So I don't know if that answered the question, Glenn, but
it kind of gives an idea, right?
Yeah.
Question for David, also kind of as a result from identity resolution discussions, you've set kind of on the CDP Institute the definition of a customer data platform, right? In there is also the fact to collect data as a platform and the ability to resolve identities. Do you think going forward, and I'm very interested in your take, that there would be room for package CDPs to offer pieces of their package as standalone solutions? Imagine that you can buy from Michael identity resolution as a piece of mParticle as a standalone. Do you see that happening?
All right, well, let me be very, very clear that our definition of CDP explicitly excludes having identity resolution as a required capability. We feel that there are a lot of third-party tools. We feel that much identity resolution actually requires third-party data. So you're going to have an external entity involved, even if you do have the matching algorithms built into your system. So we do not require identity resolution capability. We do require that identity resolution be available in the solution. So one way or the other, the CDP has to make it possible. It just does not have to have its own technology. So, and that is not necessarily the way other people think about it.
Okay, cool.
But to your actual question about will the CDP vendors refactor and sell components separately, or we see a little of that now. I honestly don't really see that it's a great business model for the CDP vendors to do that, but it's technically, if they've factored it out properly and they've made it available as a service in a technical sense, that which some of them have and more of them are doing, yeah, you could do that. Again, you really have to ask why you'd bother, but it's not impossible. In some situations, it might make sense, like identity resolution. There's some of them really do a good job with identity resolution, so maybe you'd want to use their identity resolution capabilities.
Okay, cool. Because we touched upon the topic of identity resolution, there's other solutions out there. Matthew, you also touched upon that in your initial agree-disagree. What do you see emerging in terms of identity resolution topics in a composable setup?
In terms of being locked into a CDP just for identity resolution, it's not necessary. It's usually one of the biggest price hikes you'll get when using a CDP to get that functionality. So I do believe there is some space out there in the market for composable solutions, but again, the complexity that comes with it, your company needs to be able to deal with that. And the solution with package is, they do it for you. So it's kind of a give and take.
So Matthew and Jacques, what's the typical implementation time of a package CDP that you've seen? So Jacques, do you want to go?
I mean, it really depends. I hate to keep saying it. Depends on the resource you have at hand, the appetite within the company to actually implement this stuff. The thing I've seen a lot of the time is the marketing team will buy a CDP and then kick it over to engineering who've not planned to do the actual instrumentation work. So it can be a week, it can be, a year.
Yeah, it's the same as Jacques. It depends on the number of sources you want to collect data from, the number of destinations, the amount of technical resources you have available in the company to do the implementation, the support from stakeholders and from higher management to push the more difficult changes through. On average, when I do CDP implementation, I'm usually working with these companies just for the base implementation from anywhere between 3 to 4 months.
Now that many CDP vendors have rolled out deeper integrations with the warehouse, can organizations implement a composable approach, using something like Census or, a package CDP like Action IQ or Simon? Do you see any key differences here?
Who wants to take that first?
I feel like this is a little bit of a loaded question. Let's not lose the forest through the trees here. Like, it all depends on what you're trying to solve for. Right? What's the use case? How do you define value? The kind of feature functionality thing that has dominated, or at least started to dominate much of the conversation in the early days of this reverse ETL is going to kill the CDP. Then it became the composable thing versus the package thing, which we're now in. It's all kind of nonsense. It's what are you trying to accomplish and what's going to be the best path to get there? The rest of it it's nonsense.
Okay. Boris, anything to add to that?
I mean, Yeah, I don't know what. I think I'll plus one MK in terms of like who's killing what. I hoped I never tried to frame anything like that in my life. But
not you.
All right. The
It's funny.
composability in software is probably the most valuable thing that helps people build scalable software. This is like just me busting out like, computer science. So it's like the most important thing that allows you to deliver more software with the same number of humans is to build composable systems, so that not everyone has to understand every piece of the system. And so insofar as like the question, which is like, hey, if these tools interop in the warehouse or, then that means they're just more interoperable, and more interoperability is good, period. Like for humans. And so to me, I'll give it to MK. Like, we should not be thinking about it in the, you must pick this, you must pick that. But I think as people who build software and who are trying to enable customers like Jacques, being interoperable is just unequivocally better for the end user.
It's time to beat the gap between data people and non-data people for good. Join us on databeats.community.